Hello and welcome to our special program To The Point. India has approximately 2.5 lakh panchayats, and these panchayats include 32 lakh representatives, out of which almost 12 lakhs are women. All of them are democratically elected. It has been 20 years since the 73rd Amendment was made to the Constitution to go ahead and devolve more powers to Panchayati Raj institutions. And we have with us today Mr. V Kishore Chandra Deo, the Minister for Panchayati Raj in the Union Cabinet, to go ahead and share more thoughts as well as shed more light on what exactly is the state of affairs in the Panchayati Raj institutions as of now. So, welcome to the show. Let me begin by quoting the first Prime Minister of India out here. You know, more than 3 decades before this 73rd Amendment was made in early 90s, he made a very strong statement about Panchayati Raj institutions, and I'll quote him out here. He specifically said, "It is the most revolutionary development in India because behind it are all the forces which, when released, will change the structure of the country." This was the thought which the first Prime Minister of the country had way back when we attained independence. Do you think this idea has been realized over the years?
Well, this idea has been there, not only after we attained independence, we had panchayats even before that. These words of Pandit ji, I think are very, very he was quite far-sighted. So, what these words of Pandit ji actually portray is that panchayat is where actually the basic foundation of our democracy lies. And strengthening of these Panchayat Raj institutions, empowering them more, making them more vibrant, more effective, would actually ultimately result in the democratic process really going down to the grassroots level of the country. And I think effort has been on since then. But a major step forward was the 73rd Amendment, which came 20 years, 2 decades ago.
As a minister, as a union minister for Panchayati Raj affairs, are you happy with the way these institutions have been working?
Well, the answer is both yes and no. Because, Panchayat Raj is, ours is a quasi-federal system. And Panchayat Raj is a concurrent list subject. We have the union territories and all the states put together, there are 30 of them. Every state has its own Panchayat Raj Act, and even after the 73rd Amendment was enacted by Parliament, where according to the 11th schedule of the Constitution, 29 items or subjects were to be devolved to the local bodies for local self-governance. I don't think there's any state which has devolved all the 29 subjects. There has been you can't generalize the success or failure of the system because different states have performed differently. Some have done well, some haven't, some are catching up. So I would say the results have been mixed, but I would hasten to add that the response has been quite positive and encouraging.
Well, you're right. We will talk about the devolution of powers by the states, and we'll go a little deeper into that. What kind of relationship states and center can have. But before that, let me talk about the structure, the overall structure of the Panchayati Raj institutions. There are 3 Fs, I'm told, in the overall structure.
Yes.
If we go by 3 Fs, it's funds, functions, and functionaries.
That's right.
That's what the overall structure for the Panchayati Raj institutions is. But do you think that this structure has been successful, or there have been flaws in this structure itself?
No, I don't think there have been any flaws in the structure because, panchayats, our constitution doesn't envisage any kind of legislative power to the panchayats. It's only executive powers. And the 3 Fs which you mentioned now, the funds, functions and functionaries, these 3 are expected to be devolved by the respective states to the local bodies. Now, some states have devolved maybe 14 out of the 29 items mentioned in the 11th schedule. Some have devolved 10, some have devolved 5, some have devolved none. So, as I mentioned earlier, it's been a varied experience from different states and UTs.
So you believe that the structure itself is perfectly okay. It depends as to how you go ahead and implement the structure.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But what about the most crucial aspect of this structure, the funds? Because if you look at any government body which has executing powers, and if there are no funds, then it's almost impossible to go ahead and run the entire machinery, and the lack of resources in terms of funds is threatening to render these grassroots institutions of governance useless.
This is precisely why we've been trying to persuade state governments to devolve more funds, because you have Panchayat Raj elections, that's all right. You have the elected representatives, and as you yourself mentioned just now, what would these representatives do in the absence of funds? Because when we talk of development, I think it's common knowledge that no development can take place without any resources, and resources means funds. So you have to have not only the functionaries, but you must have the funds also. And if you have the funds, you must have functions. Functions means devolution of certain powers, at least with regard to the matters which the panchayats are supposed to exercise their powers over.
So how do we go ahead and assess the particular situation? Assessing the situation, you also agree to the point that yes, there is more needs to be done as far as the front of funds is concerned.
So you see, this is actually, as far as the center is concerned, most of the funds go to the states. Now let us say, take one subject, for example, education, or let us take, for example, let's say health. Now, education in the primary level or the elementary level up to the secondary level is supposed to be imparted by the local bodies at the panchayat level, at the intermediate bodies in the district, for which center gives the funds to the states. From the states, it's supposed to percolate down to the local bodies. So unless the states do it, there's no way by which in our present scheme of a constitutional mechanism that the center can directly send money to the local bodies or to the panchayats. Then from tomorrow you'll find there'll be a big uproar saying that we are trampling over the federal powers of the states.
So again there will be a discussion on the federal structure and all. We'll take a short break out here, but when we come back, we will discuss with the Union Minister for Panchayati Raj Affairs about the report of an expert committee which has criticized or pointed out rather the flaws in the Panchayati Raj system, as well as suggested some changes. Welcome back. We still have Mr. Deo with us. Sir, recently there was a expert committee which was constituted by your government, and that committee had submitted its report. Now, in that particular report, and incidentally, that committee was headed by Mr. Manishankar Iyer, who is your colleague as well as who was holding the charge of the Panchayati Raj Ministry earlier as well. That report says that given the fact that the entire concept was to devolution of powers as well as providing the funds, giving more authority to the grassroots representatives, that was the objective. But that objective doesn't seem to have been fulfilled. Rather, the representatives at the grassroots level seem to be disillusioned with the idea of Panchayati Raj institutions. Do you agree?
Well, you see, first of all, let me mention that this expert committee was set up by me, and Manishankar Iyer, who was former Union Minister also for Panchayat Raj, actually, he was the chairman of this committee. He's been quite dedicated for the cause of Panchayat Raj and local local governance. Therefore, I thought it fit that he should chair this committee and give a present report, which he did present to us on the 24th of this month, which was the National Panchayat Raj Day. Well, it's a voluminous report. It's got 4 volumes. So, to be frank with you, Parliament session is on. I have not yet gone through that report in detail. But again, I would like to mention to you that, you see, after all, as I had mentioned earlier, Panchayat Raj, this ministry itself is, I think, less than a decade old. Yeah. See, before that, Panchayat Raj didn't have a separate department. It wasn't a separate ministry. Amendment, of course, came 2 decades ago. So, during the last 7 or 8 years, apart from what the Panchayat Raj ministry at the center has been trying to do, unless the state governments also cooperate, it would be very difficult to devolve funds to the grassroots level, because as I mentioned, it is actually the function of the states to carry on this devolution. Now, some states have done very well. States like Kerala, like Maharashtra, like Karnataka, of late Odisha, they have done quite well, but there are many states which have not. For instance, in states like Jammu and Kashmir, in states like Jharkhand, they haven't had elections, Panchayat Raj elections for 32 years. And even after having elections, I don't think they've devolved any functions or funds so far. I've been in touch with the chief ministers myself. I've been writing to them. My officials are in touch with the officials of the governments in these states. But unfortunately, they have done little so far. So unless the states also cooperate, it's impossible, not possible, but it is impossible for the central government to force this devolution, this process of devolution.
Okay, let me bring in one very important point out here with respect to the central government of that particular report. The report says that on a particular, after a sustained survey of a particular area on a particular schemes, it was found that apart from MNREGS, that's Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, and a few other centrally sponsored schemes, the Panchayati Raj institutions do not have much role to play in majority of centrally sponsored schemes, wherein the benefit of those schemes actually are meant to percolate to the people at the rural level. So in effect, the panchayats should have a role in implementation of those schemes, but it does not have.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. You're 100% correct. That's the intention of the central government. They should have a role in implementation of these schemes. In fact, I feel that the panchayats should be the convergence points as far as implementation of all these schemes are concerned. But then this is what devolution of functions is all about. And this is precisely what the state governments have not done so far.
Exactly the same thing the Prime Minister said in his address to the this function to mark the 20th anniversary of the 73rd Amendment. He reviewed the fact that the officials, that the bureaucracy is still not willing to go ahead and share power with the panchayats. There has to be a change of mindset. Do you think it's a problem of the mindset vis-a-vis the bureaucracy?
No, I think it's not just the bureaucracy. There should be a political will also. I think more than the bureaucracy, I think it's the political leadership which should take the lead. Because if powers have to be devolved by state government, I don't think it's the bureaucrats who do it. It's the chief minister who will have to do it. His cabinet will have to take a decision. And once they take a decision, the bureaucrats will have to cooperate. They have cooperated earlier. They have done so in states where functions have been devolved, where funds also have been allotted for local self-governance. So more than a bureaucratic problem, I think it's a political problem.
So you mean to say that the buck stops with the political leadership? They will have to go ahead and take proactive steps.
The buck doesn't stop with them, it starts with there.
Okay. Let me go back to the question of funds and center providing more funds in centrally sponsored schemes. A very interesting observation made by Mr. Iyer in that report, and I was reading it. It says, outcomes have not matched the outlays. And most of the schemes in which the Panchayati Raj institutions are supposed to play a very important role are those schemes which are centrally sponsored. So how do you address this challenge? Yes, fine, I admit your point, and everyone would agree as well that given the federal structure, it is for the states to go ahead and devolve powers as well. There must be some way.
You see, as far as the Manrega is concerned, it's a scheme of the Ministry of Rural Development. As far as Panchayat Raj Ministry is concerned, it's the panchayats in the states which are supposed to decide what works are to be taken up under the Manrega scheme. So in fact, actually Manrega is nothing directly to do with me. As far as I am concerned, my job is to actually strengthen the infrastructure, the Panchayat Raj institutions in the state, which we've been trying to do systematically. After that, it's up to the states to use those panchayats for the purpose that they are meant to be used.
In terms of centrally sponsored scheme, as well as those schemes which are put in place by the states as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, we'll continue this discussion and try and find out from the Union Minister for Panchayati Raj as to what can be the roadmap ahead for these Panchayati Raj institutions for better utilization of the potential which we have at the grassroots level. But before that, let's take a short break. Welcome back. We're having a very interesting discussion with Mr. V Kishore Chandra Deo, the Union Minister for Panchayati Raj. Sir, coming back to the overarching question in this entire concept of Panchayati Raj institutions, the relation between the centre and the states. The states have to go ahead and devolve power as per the laid down guidelines. Many states are yet to do so. You yourself also pointed out. The expert committee report points out. Several other independent analyses have also pointed out the same. Some states have taken a large gap before holding the elections for the panchayat bodies. Even the state of J&K, the elections were held after 12 years. How do you think the centre can go ahead and intervene or act in these situations when the states do not devolve power, one, or two, do not hold elections to the panchayat bodies?
Well, the 73rd Amendment requires that every state should compulsorily hold elections within 6 months after the period is over, the stipulated period is over. As you yourself mentioned, Jammu and Kashmir didn't have it for 12 years. Jharkhand did not have it for 32 years.
32 years.
32 years, which means these states did not have any Panchayat Raj institutions at all, let alone, I mean, devolution of funds and functionaries will take place only when you have.
We'll have any institutions in place, PRIs in place.
But even that was not there. Now, unfortunately, in my own state of Andhra Pradesh, the state government has not held elections for the last 2 years, despite my having sent reminders and requests from here to my state government to do so immediately, but still they have not done so. This is unfortunate. You see, now as far as we are concerned, there are certain funds which go from the centre, for which I think it's mandatory for state governments to hold elections, because these are funds which are to be ultimately utilized by the panchayats. Now, I'll give you one instance, is that of the Ministry of Rural Drinking Water and Sanitation. See, under the 13th Finance Commission, certain funds were to be released for this purpose to the state government. And I advised the state government, the Ministry of Rural Drinking Water and Sanitation, not to release these funds to the states which have not held elections, because this is mandatory. This is a constitutional requirement. So those states, even including my state, has been deprived of these funds now for 2 years. Now, we have actually launched a new scheme called the Rajiv Gandhi RGPSA, the Rajiv Gandhi Panchayat Sashakti Abhiyan. Now, this is a demand-driven scheme. Now, as far as this scheme is concerned, I propose to help the state governments to strengthen the Panchayat Raj institutions by giving 75% of the funds for a purpose that they require, subject to the condition that they give 25% in the plains all over the country, and it would be on a 90-10 basis in the northeastern region due to the extraordinary conditions that prevail over there.
So basically, you're trying to incentivize the entire concept, so the states go ahead and fall in line, put the Panchayati Raj institutions in place, and devolve powers to them.
No, not only that, you see, this is a demand-driven scheme. So I'm not thrusting it down state governments or the UTs for any specific purpose that I will command them from here to do. In fact, I am asking the states and the UTs to give their plans, to ask us what they want these funds for, whether they want buildings for the Panchayat Raj, whether they want it for the personnel, whether they want to build up the e-governance, or for anything that would strengthen their institutions according to the PRIs, according to their requirements. And the moment I get their plans, I will release these funds, but on condition that they hold elections within the stipulated time. I've also introduced a marking system for the funds, functions, and functionaries that they would devolve, and many other criteria. So based on these criteria and marking system, I'll be releasing funds to these states after they submit their plans.
Okay, let me come to a very positive aspect of the Panchayati Raj institutions, and that has been the empowerment of women. The sheer number of the women representatives in panchayats, 12 lakh, is a testimony to the fact that the women empowerment has taken place. But then, what about capacity building? What about training these representatives? Even the report of the committee which was constituted by you also says that the representatives in the panchayat should be trained in accounts as well as in auditing processes as well.
Yes, absolutely. This is why, as I told you, it's this RGP is a demand-driven scheme, and if a particular state wants a capacity building to be done, we will fund them for that. So, as I told you, the funding will be based on the requirement of every state. But let me hasten to add that we have the State Institutes of Rural Development, we have the National Institute of Rural Development in Hyderabad, and we have been sending representatives, elected representatives for capacity building, for training to these institutes. We did so with the elected representatives of Jammu and Kashmir in batches, and I propose to, during the next 5-year plan period, to strengthen these capacity building resource centers, and in fact, I'm planning to have one in every district to ensure that this takes place.
Okay. One very interesting fact which I came across is that in the 12th 5-year plan, the fund allocation for the the help which is being given by the center to the states for putting in these institutions, PRIs in place and sustaining them, has been increased by 10 times now. That's a significant increase in a 5-year plan. How will it help, and what is the roadmap for this particular?
Well, as I told you, the roadmap is the RGPSA, and I think for this allotment, we would be 650 crores from the money that's been sanctioned now, plus from rural development. I think the minister, my esteemed colleague from there, had agreed to give 1% because panchayats are used for implementing most of the programs of the Ministry of Rural Development. So 650 plus 900 is almost 1500 crores per year. Is a substantial amount, and I have to only thank the Prime Minister and the Cabinet for having cleared this, because this is I think will go a long way in strengthening PRIs all over the country.
So basically the idea is to go ahead and incentivize the entire concept of PRIs for the state governments to so that they go ahead and put more focus into that, devolve more powers to the to these grassroots level organizations. Is that what the center is trying to do? You
see, one is to incentivize, to sensitize them, but secondly, as I told you at the very beginning, we are giving a substantial amount. You see, our contribution is going to be 75%. So all that the state governments who've been complaining of lack of funds will have to give only 25%. And I think that's quite a reasonable amount to ask the state governments, because this is in their realm, it's a state subject. And in the Northeast, I'll be giving 90%. And with that, I hope the state governments will come forward and play their role to ensure that these PRIs get strengthened further.
One last question before we come to the end of this interview. You spent almost 3 years, almost 1.5 years rather, in this ministry, and you've taken certain measures. What is the roadmap ahead for the effective implementation of the programs by the PRIs you foresee?
You see, effective implementation is the strengthening of PRIs, because unless PRIs are strengthened, unless the capacity building is done, unless they have the personnel, unless they have the place, you see, they cannot perform the functions. So that's precisely the roadmap that I'm planning. Apart from that, I have launched an ambitious program of e-governance. Already we have 4 softwares which are functioning. I have developed 6 more softwares which I launched last year. The personnel are in the process of being trained, and once the training is over, I'll have 10 different softwares which will be available to all the Panchayat Raj institutions. I also expect to provide broadband connections to all the 2,46,000 panchayats by the year 2014.
So effectively, if you look at it that way, everything is interconnected, be it the devolution of powers or the providing funds to the PRIs or capacity building. Everything is interconnected to go ahead and ensure that these grassroots level organizations become a success. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for being with Rajya Sabha TV. So this was the Union Minister for Panchayati Raj sharing with us his thoughts on what exactly is wrong with the Panchayati Raj system. How can it be treated? And what is the future roadmap ahead for these grassroots institutions? We'll come back again next week with another personality and with a different issue. Till then, keep watching Rajya Sabha television.